Hey everyone, welcome to Are We There Yet? I'm your host, Susan Ruth.
And I'm your host, Mara Adelman, and we are two humans having the real conversations and raising the questions we all have about where the there really is when it comes to dating, relationships, and sex.
And this is episode 7, Be Yourself. And here we are. And today we're not just two humans, we're 3 humans because we have my friend Ross Simanteris. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you so much, Susan Mara, for having me. This is an honor. I'm really excited to be here.
Yay. And Ross, you identify as a bisexual male.
That's correct.
And your journey to that understanding of yourself was a long arc. And I'd love for you, and Mara would love for you to tell your story about that.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I'm excited to share. It's a long one and definitely a complicated one, and it's certainly been a journey. But as I always like to look at it, we're all on a path, our own individual path, and we come to terms with things at different times. And some people have themselves, or think they have themselves fully figured out at 16, 17, and the rest of us are just going well into adulthood and still learning things every day. And I certainly am one of the
48 and still learning, honey.
Exactly. So growing up here in California for the first part of my life was definitely it was a different culture than it is today. And I mean, I'm would say a younger millennial. I was born in 1994 and in San Diego, which is, in terms of California cities, I would say more conservative than most. And I wouldn't think that it was the most healthy environment to kind of be like progressive enough to even consider that you should come into your own, I mean, from childhood. And I think that, my parents are very understanding people, but definitely around you growing up, it's thinking that, straight is normal and gay is, that's it. And everything else is just like filler and people just explaining away things. I mean, I would say even at the height of my denial, I believed that bisexual wasn't even a thing. I thought that people just didn't want to come to terms with being gay and thought it would be easier for them to explain it away that way.
Were you dating women? Or
yes.
I guess at that age, it would be girls. Were you dating girls at that age? And yeah.
Oh, definitely. And I think, for most males, there's always a healthy level of experimentation, especially when you're young. I would say in that preteen, hitting early pubescent days. And, the conservative mindset will explain that away as boys will be boys behavior. And so I definitely had that as my first exposure to anything sexual or romantic in terms. But in that situation, it was just easier to be alone with a boy than a girl at that age. Nobody wants to leave their 12-year-old boy and girl alone together.
No.
But it was definitely confusing for me because I definitely felt attraction to both sexes from people I knew. And I just, couldn't figure out what was what. Kind of like, I knew that I was attracted to women, and I knew that society told us that we were supposed to be attracted to women. So there was never really a feeling of like full denial, like I'm living a lie, but it definitely felt, even when I didn't realize it, that I was sort of a shell of a person. Like half of myself was completely not exposed. And it's funny because my journey really started when I was 5. I got into acting up here in Los Angeles and had quite a lengthy, working career as a child actor here in film and TV. And you would think there and in any kind of creative area that you would feel free enough to be like, be yourself, be who you are, like try new things, explore. But it certainly wasn't that, because I will say that the film and TV industry of today is a lot different than the film and TV industry from my childhood, especially when they want you to play an all-American type, which as a boy, that was the type they always cast you for. So it's like little boy next door, has a crush on the girl, is holding a football when in the most part, I was horrible at football, could not play it at all. But so there, between that and just toxic masculinity growing up here. So it's like, if you're in California and you're a boy, you have to skate, you have to skateboard, you have to surf, you have to play some sort of contact sport or baseball or football, or for me, it was lacrosse that I ended up getting into. That was the one sport that I thought was contact enough to play, but not too rough. So that kind of set me back a ways. And it was confusing because I was definitely attracted to and pursuing women, but between friends and teammates, there was definitely like stirrings of feelings and of attraction, and I just couldn't accept it. I could not, and I really overcompensated for that by making like certain homophobic comments to friends, to never to anyone's face. I don't think I could do that to anyone in the community, even at the height of my denial. It just would not have sat right. But it is funny that you're making stereotypes or making comments that are kind of judgmental to your team or your friends, and you just you're overdoing the masculinity. But at the same time, even while I was dating women, there was definitely in high school some I'm not going to pretend that I was a saint in high school. There definitely was alcohol use in those days, so definitely some alcohol fueled experimentation with friends and classmates, teammates, whoever have you, but definitely people I knew, because it's easy to keep it a secret then when it's like you're both not trying to
Yeah, and you're
out
blaming it on the
yourself.
alcohol. You can say, oh, well, I was drunk, so it doesn't really count, or yeah.
Exactly. Just a way to explain it away. And then also, if it's something that's secret, that the other person isn't going to say anything, so you feel safe in that space.
Mhm.
But at the same time, doing that isn't gonna help you come out at all. It's only gonna push you further in, because you're gonna get comfortable in that mindset and be like, okay, I can get the surface level satisfaction or attraction I need from this, but I don't need to come out or be public about it. And when people won't look at me differently at all or anything like that. And I would say that really all kind of went out the window once I went to college, because I never dated any women for very, very long. I mean, I think the longest was maybe a year, or like a little under a year and a half. I mean, we were always friendly. We were always, having relations, but I never could get that like tied down into a relationship with a woman. I also think that is probably because of my personality. I'm like a very free person that feel like sex and love don't need to go hand in hand. They're not mutually exclusive. It's very healthy to have a sex life with people who you are connected with. And that doesn't mean that they have to be your partner. And that doesn't mean that you're also cheating on your partner. But in a traditional heterosexual relationship, at least the ones that I had been in, that was never going to work. And even when I did try it with a very good friend of mine, she and I are still close to this day, but we never made that relationship level, it didn't work, because I ended up getting somewhat not jealous, but worried, again, put the toxic masculinity in there, because then you're comparing yourself to your, overly straight friends, or like, oh, so this is who I'm losing out to. Terrific. And that just, it didn't work.
Were you processing self-loathing because you didn't, if bisexuality was this no man's land for ghosts, and you were already hooking up with some guys at your school in secret, yet you're compensating with this homophobia, if you will, how did that play out in your brain the whole time? Or did you just shove it away? Were you conscious of it?
I tried to make myself not conscious of it, but I definitely was. And a lot of it is in hindsight. And in my high school, there were maybe 1 to 2 openly gay students. This was a private prep school that was actually you know, they claim to be a Catholic school, but I can say we never did anything religion based there for the most part. So it was not an environment that really would encourage people to come out. So the ones that were so brave, and I have so much respect for now. But at the time, I would look at them doing things that were, stereotypically maybe viewed as flamboyant, which now as a bisexual, I know it's like you do overcompensate for a period when you come out. It's just natural because you kept so much in. And then it's like, how do I distinguish myself as the individual? And I would look at them and my friends would be like, what are they doing? They're just like making, idiots of themselves, just making the rest of us uncomfortable. But deep down, and I recognize this now, I was definitely jealous. I was like, they're being themselves and they're proud of it and they're rocking it. And I just don't have the confidence to do that because I'm so afraid that I'm just going to lose my friends and I'm going to hear people making just awful comments like you looked at me in the locker room, like I changed in front of you, like all this weird stuff that's like, I'm still me and I literally feel nothing for you, but whatever, dude. That played out in my head for years. Literally these visuals of just everyone being so like weirded out and people just,
Ross, what about the people that you were kind of messing around with? Did you guys ever have conversations along these lines, or was it kind of like, and did they ever come out as gay or bisexual, or do you know about where?
Oh, yes. In the high school stage, they've all pretty much come out, except for one of my friends who is a bisexual as well. He has a long-term girlfriend right now. She is also a bisexual, but neither of them are really comfortable enough to come out at this time. Mm-hmm. Which, but the other ones, yeah, they came out as gay for the most part long before I did. And I think the problem is that when you're doing that regularly, it's very natural to start to develop feelings. I didn't allow myself to do that because the guys that I did have feelings for were at the time I viewed as, unattainable, definitely straight, and this is at the time. I will say that changed later. I mean, when you feel something, in my experience, it's like, there's something there, almost always. So, but whether yeah.
It's right for you or not, if you feel something, there is something there.
Exactly. Well, that's really interesting. Do you mean there's something there that the other person has there is a sense of reciprocity? Yes. That if there's okay.
Right. In my experience, I've anything that I've ever taken the guts to act on has always panned out. That's that there was, and sometimes it was 4 or 5 years later that it actually came to fruition. And it was very reassuring to feel like, okay, I was not just, some horny teenager who was just looking at every attractive friend he had in that way. But I think when I wasn't really fully accepting it, the people who I was, hooking up with who were of the same sex, who were guys, I liked them as friends, but I didn't like them at a level anything above that. And a couple of the times they started to develop feelings, and that's when I got scared. And I would revert back into the, no, I'm fully straight mode for months at a time, and that was just, my coping was to just run from the situation.
From a straight relationship or from a gay relationship?
From a gay one. I would literally stress to them, it's like, no, we're just going to be friends for now. It's like, oh no, we're only going to hang out in groups for the time being. It's like, I was never the type to be like, done, goodbye, because that would draw too much attention, So in that sense, at least I wasn't one of those horrible, people who, and they're not horrible, but, people who handle their denial by ghosting is something that, a lot of people do. I just had to put a stop to anything that was romantic, because I said, no, not happening. And when I went to college, I left California and went to New York City to study at St. John's, and got involved with the lacrosse team there. And that was an environment that I thought was, okay, this is a bunch of Long Island guys, a bunch of guys from New Jersey, a bunch of guys from upstate. This is going to be even less accepting than California. But at the same time, I'm in New York City. My family is 3,000 miles away. The people that I'm afraid of embarrassing or having them find out, I don't know anyone. I remember when like a couple kids from my high school transferred in, then I got this deer in the headlights look like, oh, now I can't live this new life here, being me. But so that kind of opened up like the freedom to try things. And I guess at the time I kind of thought, okay, we're in the dorm buildings, maybe I'll meet some people, maybe, it'll be like a freer dating scene. I mean, I'm definitely not ready to come out. I mean, I didn't even, you put it in those terms at the time. It was, it's like, yeah, maybe I'll, have a little fun or whatever it is. But that didn't end up happening. I don't think I had the guts, even as an 18-year-old freshman. I've always tended to gravitate towards people I knew. So my teammates, friends of mine who were in frats, people like that. And it's like, that kind of really started to open my eyes to realize that there were a lot of guys like me out there. And a lot of them were actually gay. And sadly, a few of them are actually still living as straight, which is really, really, sad when you think about it. But it opened my eyes to realize that there were a lot of very masculine, or I guess as you call it, straight presenting people out there who they really have this other side to them. And it always, would come out, at parties or after parties or just different one-on-one moments. And that's kind of when it started to get more and more regular. I ended up definitely falling for my best friend at the time. And we were very close. And it was one of those friendships where all of our teammates and friends would like make jokes about like, oh, you guys are so close. You're definitely doing such and such in the back there or whatever. And we're like, oh yeah, that sucks stuff. No, yeah, you're gay. They're gay. It's like just typical guy stuff, and something ended up happening, between us, just a random moment, a sober moment too, which is why it was definitely significant. And we were both he and I were dating different women at the time. And he and I, and we're still very close friends to this day, very, very close. But he and I went on to maybe a multiple year secret relationship. And it's only my partner now, who I'm with, my partner Nick, who Susan,
yes, I adore,
who has actually made me come to terms with the fact, like, no, that was a relationship. That's what that was like, because he was like, he's like, oh, you're talking to your ex still. And I said, well, don't call him that. He wasn't my ex. And then he went, no, he definitely was. If this was a multi-year relationship that was carried on in secret. And that led to a lot of tension and issues, and definitely, repressed anger between us, and like kind of a codependency that just wasn't healthy. And looking back on it now, all of that could have been avoided if we were just open with each other, and not even with each other, but just with the world, with our community. But we both came from situations where,
Sorry, I keep coming to this thought that you keep saying, that you couldn't imagine yourself in a relationship with a man. Do you think that you hadn't ever seen that modeled? Like you said,
never
imagine yourself in a straight relationship, but not with a male. Like never had that modeled before.
Never. I couldn't fathom it, because I never saw any kind of example except for what stereotypes on TV and film, or people who are, either more feminine presenting, or just they're proud to be, more flamboyant, which is great. But that wasn't me. And I didn't really realize there was another side. I thought, if you came out, this is what you have to be. And so I couldn't identify with that. And I felt like I don't really belong in this, it has to be something else, and there's, a lot of, but at this point I did realize that bisexuality was a thing. That was interesting. I knew it was a sexual orientation, but I still didn't consider myself that. And it was just certainly an interesting journey throughout that relationship. And, throughout my time in New York, that was from 2013 to early 2019. Then I came back to San Diego right before the pandemic, just because of a whole job and mentality switched. I switched out of business to go back into more creative, and had to move back to San Diego to kind of readjust before I eventually made this move up here to Los Angeles. And then the pandemic hit. So that is really what gave me the push to start getting on dating apps. And of course, you focus on only the gay dating apps first because it can be anonymous, it can be kind of secret. I couldn't bring myself to set myself on a Tinder or a Bumble or a Hinge to liking men and women, because I knew that people I know are on those apps when we're in the same area. If they see that, I don't know what's going to happen. And I felt safe enough that, okay, my friends in New York, love me as who I am, even though I'm not out to them. It's like, I'm 3,000 miles away. There's no team anymore. It's going to be okay, So I pursued that. And at the same time, I was pursuing women, mostly, people who I had, been with in the past who were in San Diego, going out on dates, going for drinks. And so I kind of was playing both worlds. And then at the same time, running into people who were guys who I knew in high school, middle school, whenever, who definitely had felt something for, and they reciprocated it back. And these were guys who also were not out. So it was just like, I think like surprise is really the theme of that period. And then when I moved up to Los Angeles in 2021, May, June of 2021, so about a year ago, it was, a few months of getting settling, going out in West Hollywood, all the time, just to try to meet people and, on dating apps looking for women. And, but at the same time, I had acknowledged myself as bisexual then. That was where it really had shifted. I think between the time when I moved down to San Diego and moved up to Los Angeles is when I began to acknowledge that, because I realized you can't be on any kind of dating app and meeting people for dates or for hookups or for whatever if you're not even, staying true to yourself. And I knew that it was like, and people would ask what your orientation or what your pronouns are, things that just, it wasn't something that I educated myself on besides, mandatory workplace training, because it just wasn't my scene. It wasn't my circle.
So you hadn't heard of the Kinsey Scale? Like you hadn't thought, do you know what the Kinsey Scale is?
Honestly, I'm still learning. So please explain. I mean, like if I might know, but
curious if like that, I always have to write it down, but it's a scale of like 1 to 6, and 0 is you're exclusively heterosexual and 6 is you're exclusively homosexual. And then there's a whole bunch of gray in the middle.
Okay.
That I think helps people kind of put themselves, we don't want to put people in boxes, but it's kind of like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I kind of fall there, right? And based on your conversation, you're probably equally heterosexual and homosexual as a bi person. Yeah. So you fall as a 3. So I just liked it because when I found it, I was like, oh, this helps people. If that was taught in school, people could go, oh, it's okay if I'm a 3, right? But none of this is anything that we don't learn enough about these things, and then people feel like they can't be themselves. Yeah,
exactly. What I think is also interesting, Ross, is it sounds like, I don't know if that's how you are now, but at least in the beginning, it sounds like sexually you were either way was good, but emotionally you felt more connected with men.
I would say definitely.
Yeah.
I grew up in a household, I'm an only child, and my mother put me in, and I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. And so my mother had me do a lot of cotillions, debutantes. It's like really training you to be a gentleman. And at that time, I became so like, I wouldn't say subservient, but like you need to do everything for a woman and they are perfect and they're like a porcelain doll and you need to get the car door and do all this. And it just, it was too much but for so many girls, it was too much. It didn't click with them. They felt like it was old fashioned or just,
you were too much of a nice guy.
Yeah.
I love the door opening. I'm a big fan. Oh, yes. Open my car door. Yes. Pull out my chair.
Yes.
And it
where do I find these cotillions?
Oh, I was talking about it's funny because my partner was telling me that, he's like, my current partner, Nick, is telling me, he's like, well, you don't need to ever know how to do a formal place setting at a white tie dinner. And I'm like, well, you never know.
You never know. You never know.
But yes, I think that sexually it could go either way. And in college, sexually is how I connected more with women. I was noticing myself getting more attention when I was a more sexual person. And I'm definitely not like pervy or forceful, but just like giving off a more energy, like, flirty. I think flirty is probably the best way to put it, I would say.
Yeah.
And that was something that I wasn't so much in high school. And that's kind of where it shifted. But with, with guys, it was like, okay, I've already developed a multi-year friendship with you. That's like step one. We're on the same team. We're part of the same group. It's something that's just like, we're already close. And so just adding a sexual element is just like adding to like the relationship.
So when you have a relationship with a same-sex partner, just as imagine you would step into a relationship with an opposite sex partner, is the conversation about your bisexuality something that comes up in the beginning or not at all? Or do you feel like doesn't matter because you're in the relationship you're in?
I think it definitely comes up. I've noticed that, when I shifted into who I am now is about August, September of 2021, when I really bit the bullet and I said, I am ready for a relationship with somebody. I don't care if it's a man or a woman, but just having Tinder, Hinge, Bumble, and all these other apps set to women is only giving me 50% of the pool. So I immediately went and I switched it. I switched it and I activated Tinder Premium. And this is actually relevant because, and then I started getting matches from both women and men. And I was really thinking it was so cool because boom, match with the girl, boom, match with the guy, talk, like see if there's a connection with both.
You just opened up your for somebody who's dating online, you just opened your pool, like huge.
Yeah. It was incredible. It's like, wow, all these matches. And now I can really focus on connecting with people. It doesn't have to be like about a certain sex and everything is different. So I went on some dates with both sexes, had some good conversations, but didn't really make an emotional connection. And then I would say not a week later is when I met my partner. And that is how we met. And we went on a hiking date here in Hollywood where we live because we live together now. And it's been kind of a like a fairy tale story from that. And
how long have you been together?
We're on 9 months. We're going on 9 months on the 13th.
Congratulations.
But they feel like they've been together forever when you're around them. I feel like when I'm with you, you feel like an old married couple.
That's what a lot of people say. And
which is great.
But you still like each other.
Oh, very much so.
Oh yeah. He's got a little, you like each other still.
Yeah, he's amazing. I mean, he's been so great for me because it was that. And, we were hanging out, going on dates, sleeping over at each other's houses for about a month before we went on a trip to the desert to La Quinta, where I wanted to take him. And then we went to Joshua Tree for the day. And it was there that we decided, we're like, no, we're definitely partners. We're definitely boyfriends. This is not just, hanging out anymore. And at that point is when I was like, okay, well then if this is real, I need to come out to my friends and family. And that was what I did. And I started off very slow. I worked my way up to my parents. Believe me, everyone says they told their parents first. It's like, oh, definitely not. So I told a couple of my high school friends who I knew pretty well. They were all shocked, except for one of my friends, the only one. Everyone else has been like, no way. All you did was talk about women. Whoa. Like, not in a disgusted way. They were like so excited, which was again a shock for me because these are people that I had spent years building in my head. We're going to say specific things and it just didn't happen. And I was so relieved. And then my one friend who I'm very close to, we used to, when we were both a couple of the oldest in our grade. So in high school, when we turned 18, we started going to the one casino in San Diego County that allowed 18-year-old gamblers and just were hanging out every day. So we got very, very close. And, he stayed over at my house. I stayed over at his all the time. So he was like, it's like, yeah, I had an idea about that. I kind of guessed, I kind of figured, which made me realize, okay, then I just really was able to show my true self to him, even though nothing happened. And personally, in between all of us, I think he's a little bit on that scale as well. So also why I think he picked up on it, but everyone else was surprised. And when it went so well, with the 3 people from high school, I decided that it was going to be another test to move on to college. How are how are my teammates? How are those frat friends? How is everyone from like New York or Long Island, New Jersey, Connecticut? How are they going to take it? And they took it even better than the California people did. I was completely blown away. And, I told my friend that I had, my best friend who I had that, secret relationship with for years, that I was going to do that. And, he just wanted me to make sure that I didn't share anything about what he and I did, because he's not at that point yet. He's not out. It's really, and it's not something I could push, but I of course respected that. But at the back of my head, I'm like, people are going to assume regardless. If we tell our teammates, they're definitely going to assume. No one's asked, except for one who already kind of figured it out in college and confided that in me, and has kept a secret, even though it's not so much a secret until, my friend is out as well. But they were just so beyond accepting, saying, oh, I wish you told me in college. Oh, I wish you'd been out in college. It would be so much cooler. I mean, it would have, opened up my eyes, you would have helped, change my thinking at the time, is what people have really said. And that was just such a relief. It was like an entire weight has been lifted. Like no one at all responded odd to it. And they were shocked, which was another thing that I was like, when you're in denial or coming to terms with your denial, you're like, oh, well, I had to be giving it away at certain times. But yeah, no one, people just didn't pick up on that vibe from me. And when I, more came out publicly after I told my parents, which that was the one that they were the most surprised. And I always find that odd because, they definitely knew about, me exploring with guys when we were like in 5th and 6th grade and 7th grade. And they're like, I remember my mom saying, oh, you're way too old to play those exploratory games. That's the word that she used. And I, like, my partner and I use that as a joke. So when she acted like, yeah, I mean, this is odd, this is coming from nowhere, I thought, really? Really? You really didn't know, even with these things, these kind of like obvious signs here, that you had no idea. And then I started to realize, like, parents, they hear what they want to hear, and they kind of ignore or push to the back of their mind what they don't. Because when I was in the, with my best friend, when we were in that secret relationship, my mom and I were arguing about something, and she's very vocal like I am, and she literally had screamed at me, and this was maybe 2019, what, are you in love with him or something? And I literally said out loud, yes, isn't it obvious? So basically I'd have been out to her then, but nope, that just was compartmentalized and put away. And I kind of viewed it as a good, let's fly under the radar. Let's pretend that didn't happen. And that probably delayed my really coming out a good year and a half or so.
But they accepted you, yes?
Yes. Immediately they accepted me. They talked about it. They said it was going to take some time for them to process it. My dad is considerably older than my mom. My mom's born in the, mid 60s. My dad was born in the early 50s. And I thought that he would be the one that would have the biggest issue with it. No, I honestly think he's a lower key guy, but he accepted it immediately and he understood it. And after doing some thinking about it, I realized, one of his best friends from college, who's never been married, is gay, like to the friends, but he is gay, but he's not. Even my mom said, oh, he's definitely like he's out to his friends, but he's not out to the public. So I realized that, okay, so my dad had a very close friend in college in the early 70s who was gay. So he obviously understands the culture. And so his acceptance, I think, was just immediate.
Was there any chance that he too had a relationship, maybe?
No, definitely not. I sometimes wish, but no, definitely.
For sure though?
From the dynamic I've seen, yes. I'm pretty fairly sure from someone who's a bisexual. I think that.
Or you have blinders.
Maybe. But you never know.
Call his dad out.
I'm glad that my dad doesn't listen to podcasts.
Question along those lines. I just lost it. I had a question. It'll come back to me.
Okay.
Yeah, continue.
Yeah, so my mother was really the one who was a little more shocked, and she kept bringing up all the homophobic comments and things that I made over the years. She's like, really, this is what you're going to do? After everything you said, how could you expect me to believe, to have thought that about you? And I think, she handled it kind of like she would any heterosexual relationship where it's like, okay, are you getting ahead of yourself? It's still very early, don't fall for this person, don't make too many plans. But I think over time, especially over the first 2 or 3 months, by Christmas, she realized that this was like a real deal, kind of one of those permanent, like, I'm just gonna say, like, my partner is the love of my life, and he's definitely my soulmate, like, by far. And it's like when I met him, I knew, and it was pretty instantaneous. And so she realized that, I have, I've met like the person that I actually want to be with for good. So I think then she started to like be even more accepting, like, okay, this is who you are. But there are still some things that things like that are from her mentality. She's, a high up executive in, tech companies from San Francisco. So, and she has an MBA and she went to college in the 80s. So she's a very particular mindset, I will say. So she's always like worrying about like how it's going to come off, or be careful about what you post, or there's people who are not going to accept you. It's being protective, but it's also kind of a limited mindset. So there are things like my grandmother is 90 right now, and she lives in Hawaii. We were just there for her 90th birthday in March, and she is like as left as they come. FDR is her favorite person ever. She lived through the Depression, very open-minded. I mean, she's from Michigan and just decided on a whim to move to Hawaii in 1957 and never come back. So she's someone I really want to tell, because she did a lot in raising me. And I've wanted to, especially because she's 90, I want her to know that I'm with someone. I want her to meet him. My mother's like, well, I don't know. Your grandmother's very traditional in her thinking. And I'm thinking like, no, she's not. She's from a Michigan, English family that like ran department stores, and she literally decided to move to Hawaii and marry a fisherman and, golfer. So it's like, no, she is not traditional.
It's funny because I think that in families it skips, like grandparents are more, whichever it is, one is more conservative, then the next generation is more liberal, then the next generation is more conservative, the next generation is more liberal. We always are trying to be opposite of our parents.
Exactly. I mean, and like thinking like, and I thought it was interesting because I definitely I don't want to anger my mother, but I do want to tell my grandma, especially because, her memory's good, but she's starting to be a little forgetful. She's 90, it's not Alzheimer's, but she's 90 years old. It's like,
and it's your story. You get to tell your story how you see fit and to whom you see fit.
Exactly. So
Ross, what do you think your grandma, that I remembered my question. It was, what was your parents' first words after you told them? What do you think your grandma's first words would be?
I think she'd be like, it's either like, like something like, Rossi, good for you. Or, oh, I always had a feeling. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me at all. That wouldn't surprise me either, in a very positive way. Like it's about time. She's very free. She's very fun. Hawaii is a place, and that's where my mother grew up. So to see her turn so more conservative has been kind of odd. But, I think my grandma says, she sent her to Michigan for a few summers when she was a teenager. And because my grandma didn't want my mom only being raised on an island in a very particular culture where no one ever leaves. They decide to stay forever and, go to the beach every day. And, my grandma wanted my mom to live and experience, but sending her to Waspish, Michigan is not like that part of Michigan. That's not gonna broaden you. That's gonna make you like naturally think that, oh, this is the culture that I should be embracing. So like my grandma always said, she left with, a flower in her hair and wearing like long muumuu dresses. And the Michigan girls who are my mom's good friends they're like, yeah, we're standing here in our penny loafers and pearls looking at her like, oh my God, we're hideous, in comparison. But my mom came back from those summers in that same style. You and she even went to college in Michigan for 2 years. So
yeah, it's that thing. You have to be opposite to your parent, because you have to have kids want to figure out what their identity is.
Exactly. They do.
In their own way.
So yeah. So I mean, I find it interesting because I think if my mother had stayed in Hawaii, definitely would not be like the same conversation we're having. But she's a golfer. My family are golfers. I think they're country club people. So their first concern was like, we don't want to be answering questions to people at the club. And I didn't like that. Nick didn't like that either. I was like, that's no, like
I have to
all
make,
those people are.
I want to second what Miss Susan said. That is your story to tell your grandmother.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because today when I was kind of thinking on this, I came across this study that said, it was from Columbia University School of Public Health, that found that lesbian, gay, and bisexual individuals who live in communities with high levels of anti-gay prejudice have a shorter life expectancy of 12 years on average. It blew me away. And
12 years.
On violence, suicide, heart disease, increased tobacco, smoking, drinking.
Right.
As a medical provider, I was mortified. I grew up in a town that's very gay friendly, Berkeley, California, if you've ever heard of it. And so you didn't have that model. Then on top of that, you're living in an area where it's almost discouraged. Well,
it is.
Yeah.
I live.
Yeah.
Yeah, North County, San Diego, Solana Beach, Rancho Santa Fe, Del Mar, those places, it's like they're right on the beach, but they're just so conservative in their thinking. It's like a lot of tech and finance people. And I mean, my parents' golf friends, like, I mean, I remember thinking back, it's like they would complain when I was a teenager. They would say, oh, how great I was because I'm, so traditional and conservative and a gentleman. But they're like, the club's getting too young and people aren't following the dress code. And these people were like 85 right now. So I'm like, Mom, you're not even 60 yet. Who cares what these people who are literally at death's door are gonna say? Like, they literally spent 40 years playing tennis and chain smoking cigarettes, and they wonder why they all have emphysema. It's like,
Right.
Don't wish that on anyone, but it's like, these are the people that you want to impress.
Also, some of the most successful humans on the planet are in the LGBTQ community. So
exactly. I mean, the thing that I always wonder is, does my mother identify as, and is she really resistant? Because she was president of her sorority, very, very like, I even like would make a joke sometimes how close she is to her best friend, who's actually my godmother. I mean, it's like they are extremely close, like very close. And her friend, her other friends from Michigan, they would, as a joke, they would call each other like a word from the community that's now a slur. And my mother stopped using that word ever since I came out. But those two things, I'm like, are you sure that you're just a little unhappy that you didn't get to, experience your own other half of your sexuality? Because maybe even, women on women or lesbian is even like would have been less accepted then than gay would have been. I don't know, but I always thought that it would be my dad that was the uphill battle and my mom was going to be the one that was immediate, like open arms. And it was like, my dad's not a hugger, so he's not an open arms, but his reaction and behavior was the equivalent to that, definitely.
Do you remember what he said?
It was more like, you need to do what makes you happy. You got to do and I support you no matter what. That's what he said. As long as you're happy and you're living the life that you want. He said, but it might be a little different in some areas for you. Might be. It wasn't it's gonna be, and you're in for a tough life kind of. It was like, he's like, you just know, things are gonna change, and you have to brace yourself that you might have some friends who aren't as accepting or people who are gonna say some things. And it was pretty, motivational to hear from a guy who's 70. So I thought that was, pretty.
Yeah.
It was pretty forward thinking for someone who grew up in Western Pennsylvania and went to Penn State and spent his career in, high level of consulting and accounting for like the government. So,
I love that though. What a journey, and welcome to being yourself.
Yes.
Yay.
Your family they did well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for having me as a guest.
Absolutely. Mara, do you have any sciencey or sexology questions?
I do have another question. So in learning about this, it came out that one third, sorry, I can't see, hold on. Yeah, 1/3 of bi adults do not disclose their sexual status to their medical providers.
Really?
Yeah. So did you feel super, and as a medical provider, we want to know these things for sexually transmitted infection screening, for counseling, for, all of that. Were you easily able to discuss that with your provider?
Definitely. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm a hypochondriac, but I'm very aware of kind of health scares and how careful you have to be, especially after, having my appendix out when I was 18 and then having a bout with one kidney stone when I was 20. I got really kind of worried about internal things. So I'm like, no, I'm not taking any chances. It's like when I was a tobacco smoker, completely honest about that on things. I didn't want to like, because why are you going to lie on a medical thing? Because it really could like be the catalyst between catching a disease or not.
That's
Yeah,
what
but people do it all the time, don't they, Mara?
Right.
that's what worries me. And I feel like I'm very open and inclusive and people do share a lot with me, but I hope that I'm not missing that for people, right? And so I was actually thinking about it, like our clinic does, like we have the little heart rainbow that we stickers that we put on our badges, and we try to be inclusive, but I think we could do better. Can you think of any ways that we can encourage people to share these things?
I mean, I honestly think that a good way to do that would be, I guess not really pressuring them into the question. I mean, I would say that if I was a healthcare provider and if I would, and I was treating someone who I thought might be, gay or bisexual, but isn't really being honest about it, I would just start talking about, I mean, as someone who is in the community, I'd be like, oh, my partner and I do this, or just kind of like using words that maybe like sound like we're encompassing and not saying, oh, oh, my wife loves that, that, I mean, as a male provider, I would think that would really like,
I'm gonna write that down for my clinic. So it's really about language. We're just trying to be, we want to be all inclusive, and I think we do okay, but I would want to make sure we didn't miss people. A couple times I had a patient and I was kind of thinking along those lines, and I just said, have you ever heard of PrEP? Would you like to start PrEP? And that opened up the whole conversation.
right.
But it also felt a little bit like I shouldn't assume these things. Would you be comfortable if somebody said to you, how would you feel about PrEP? Do you know about it?
Oh, I would feel completely comfortable because I mean, I think anyone in the dating scene is kind of like, nervous about STDs these days. I mean, on the dating apps, I mean, especially when it was guys, they were like, when do you have your last test dates? Can I see them? And I was like, yeah, I, get tested pretty regularly. I mean, I haven't been doing it as much since I have a partner, since we're pretty, we don't have any, even though we do technically both believe in open relationships, we haven't like had any other partners yet. So there hasn't been a need to, but yeah, I always would get tested regularly. So I would want a provider to ask me about PrEP. And I think that would open up the conversation and someone could be like, oh, I don't do that. Or, for example, or this is like, it might even open up a way that people can explain what their sex life is, because they could say, oh, I don't need PrEP because I'm interested in this, or I'm asexual, or, I mean, it was only this summer that I met a couple people who were asexual and really got an understanding of what that was. So like, for example, they might feel like left out when it's like, well, what about us,
Yeah, that's a really good point. Representation is so important. And there is a huge swath of people that are probably, I mean, the LGBTQIA plus, keeps going. There's some letters after that, but we, I just did it earlier today with you guys that said, LGBTQ, and I stopped there. And then there's this whole swath of people are like, hello.
I know.
Yeah. And it is about a practice, of remembering that it's all kinds of kinds, and that scale is humongous.
It is.
Gender identity is humongous. Sexual identity is humongous.
Actually, and on the Kinsey scale, they do have an X at the bottom for people who have no sexual contact or who are asexual. So they included that on there.
That's great.
I wasn't even aware of it as a medical provider until I took my sexology course, though. I had never.
Oh, really? Wow.
I wouldn't want to be sexual and wouldn't have that drive. So yeah, there's so much learning to be done. On that note, we should clarify, we talked about PrEP on a past episode, but PrEP is prophylaxis pill for HIV, 99% effective for even with males who have anal receptive sex with other males, and can be used for women, sex workers, anybody, essentially. I have transgender patients on it. So it's a protection against HIV.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is a great conversation, y'all. Ross, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
No.
What's your boyfriend's name?
Nick.
Nick, tell us your favorite thing about Nick.
I would say my favorite thing about Nick is just how much he makes me smile. He just would light up a room every time he comes in, and he makes me feel safe, and he makes me feel loved, and just it really everything about him. But just his presence makes me smile, and that's something I really always wanted in a person.
I had to ask because I'm a sucker for a good romantic love story. Okay, and then, but of course, on the other hand, the one thing you always want to kill him about, what's that one thing, if you don't mind sharing?
Oh, God.
Sure. He is so quick to correct me if I get something wrong. Like, oh no, years. If I'm talking about like something that happened in the past, but I'm like, yeah, I think I was 5, so it must have been 2000. And he, before I can even finish, I'm like trying to think out loud. He goes, "You were born in 1994. It was 1999." I'm like, thank you. That I don't like. That is the one thing.
So he's a math savant, in other words.
Yes.
My favorite thing about Nick is he emanates kindness.
Yes, he really does.
Yeah.
What one lucky man.
Yay. Ross, thank you so much for being on the show. Mara, thank you for being awesome and brilliant as usual.
Susan, for being brilliant as always.
Yay. And thanks for watching and listening, everyone. We really appreciate it. And we will be back in a couple weeks with episode 8. We go ever forward.
Thank you so much for having me, and thanks for hearing my story.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing it and for being honest and open. And I think every time somebody tells their story, it allows for someone else to feel comfortable in their own story and to move forward in their life, knowing that there's somebody, whether or not they're ready to share it, at least they know that they're not alone. So
right, exactly.
Yeah.
We all have our journeys, but we can all share and have common, struggles that we go through that just they bond us together.
Absolutely. You're not alone. That's the big takeaway.
Yes.
Nobody is alone. When you tell your grandmother, will you share the story with Susan? And is it okay if she shares with me? Because I want to know how it goes.
Of course, I would be honored to. Yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm definitely going to share it with Susan. I hope she shares it with you. I want everyone to keep everyone updated.
Yes.
Great. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Bye.